Hey, good evening, church. Welcome to what we're calling COVID-19 and the Global Church. I'm Alan Stanglin. This is Adam Gray, who is our family discipleship minister here at Central, and Steve Kearley, one of our shepherds and the chairman of our Foreign Missions Committee, is also here tonight. He'll be joining us in a few minutes. I'm glad that you're here with us this evening. We're just going to jump right into it. I know several of you have already chimed in and told us that you're watching, so Yvonne and Louise and Missy and Bob and Donna, we're glad that y'all are with us tonight, and everybody else who joins in, we're glad that you're here. And what I would say is make sure that you're letting us know that you're here, and also we're going to be asking some questions of you throughout the presentation tonight, and I'd love for you to comment, to let us know what you're thinking, to ask us questions that we can answer, and maybe it would prompt some of our conversation together tonight. You know, the Central Church of Christ has a long and storied, and I think very proud history of supporting foreign missionaries and being involved in their lives, equipping them, and supporting them as they spread the gospel all over the world. And we're going to be hearing from a couple of them tonight. Junior and Patricia Lira, of course, are just beloved by this church. They've been at the Capital City Church in Brasilia for 13 years. We've been supporting them during that time. They try to come here every couple of years. In fact, they were supposed to be here this summer, but that got shot all to pieces. But, you know, we go there to see them in Brasilia at that Capital City Church every couple of years, and we love them so much. And then Seth Bouchelle, who grew up in this church. He's one of ours. You were his youth minister, Adam.
I was.
I know you're proud of him, and we all are. But Seth is planting churches and equipping and supporting church planters in New York City, in the Bronx, and in the Manhattan area. And, you know, those are two. You talk about Brazil and you talk about New York City.
Yep.
Those are two of the hardest hit areas by this COVID-19 on our planet. And so we've got people on the ground in these critical areas right now, in these tough conditions, and they are spreading the gospel. And seeing our brothers and sisters tonight, listening to their stories, I think is going to connect us to them. It's going to connect us to God's global church, what He's got going on, not just here, but around the world. And I know I have felt, just with this COVID-19, Adam, I have felt in weird ways kind of more of a connection to God's global church. I think when we're having to do things online, like we had to for 10 weeks, and when we're having to wear masks and use those little rip and sip communion kits, you know, I'm reminded that everybody's doing this.
Everybody's doing it.
Everybody, and I feel like, you know, even during this trial, this difficult time of uncertainty, we're all in it together. And that has given me a sense of camaraderie and I think harmony with the rest of God's church. That's been kind of a side benefit. And I was wondering, have there been things like that for you?
It's almost a misery loves company. Like, no one knows what to do. Everybody's reading, everybody's on Zoom asking questions, it's a collaborative, you know what I'm saying? We're sharing resources and communicating and sharing wisdom, and it's brought there's a sense of a global connectivity with what the church is doing.
I'm wondering tonight, how have you felt more a part of God's global church over the last 2 or 3 months? Has there been anything that's happened? Has it been something about the conditions that make you feel more a part of what God is doing around the world and more, I guess, focused on what's happening outside of our own church or outside of our own situation? If you wanted to comment on that, we would share those with everybody tonight. Before we watch your interview with Seth Bouchelle, Adam, what should we be looking for? What do you want us to pay attention to?
Okay, I would suggest you pay attention to what I'm going to say are probably 3 concentric circles of how Seth's going to be talking. He's going to be sharing his experience of his very astute knowledge of his neighborhood, of the Bronx context. And so it's not just the church people, but in the mission field that he knows so well. That's the largest circle he's going to speak to. And then kind of the next inner circle is obviously his churches. and his church leaders and how they're feeling and how it's affecting their spiritual lives and their leadership and their families personally. But then Seth's going to talk about himself and his own interior experience and how he's thinking and reflecting. So all three circles, you're going to hear from all three of those.
Well, we're looking forward to this video. This is Seth Bouchelle, our missionary, our guy on the streets of New York City in a conversation that Adam had with him last week.
All right, hi Central. This is Adam Gray. I'm here with our dear friend, Seth Bouchelle. Seth, hi.
How you going?
So thank you for doing this. It is good to be with you. Okay, so let's get into it. I think our church is wanting to hear from you in terms of your experience of the pandemic. I think we're going to get into just describing the experience in the New York area, but then we also want to get into obviously how your ministry is doing, how it's been affected, but even you personally. So, so why don't we just start with just generally how's the pandemic, how's the COVID, how's it impacted you? How would you just kind of start out describing it for us?
Yeah, I mean, I guess we're looking at a few months now, so it's been a mixed experience because it's gone on long enough. I think on the one hand, I said this to you probably back in end of March, early April. As an introvert, I would never want to profit from anyone else's misery, but I mean, having an excuse to stay home for days on end and, not have a valid excuse to say no to showing up and spending time with people is a godsend. Well, I mean, of course, that's a bit tongue in cheek. On the other hand, it's been really hard on the communities that people were involved with. New York is the epicenter of this in the country.
Yep.
And the U.S. has more cases than any other country in the world. And the Bronx is the epicenter of COVID in New York.
Oh, okay.
Far and away more cases than any other borough, far more deaths. A lot of that is related to the poverty of my borough. That COVID deaths are usually overlapping with pre-existing conditions. And, a lot of food deserts in my neighborhood, a lot of poor access to healthcare. And so we also have a lot of people who can't afford to be without work, even if they're not essential workers. And so I think for a lot of the people that we work with, this has been a time of incredible economic stress because they either are without work. And so, there's a question of how am I going to pay my rent this month? How am I going to pay my bills this month? Or they had to continue to work whether or not they were an essential worker and then put themselves at risk to stay home. So it was a time of real economic stress and anxiety for a lot of the people we minister with. Fortunately, none of the people directly involved in our church have died as a result of the virus, but a lot of our kind of more peripheral relationships, we know a fair number of people who died.
Okay.
Just neighbors or extended family of people involved in church. And that's been difficult, not only because of the disorientation that brings, but because of COVID, you're not supposed to have something like a funeral. You can't be with them in the hospital when they pass.
Okay.
Right. And, the Bronx traditions around kind of honoring the dead, it's, big candlelight vigil block party. And so there's kind of been a binary of either don't really have access to the rituals and traditions that help you grieve and process a loss, or defy quarantine, do those things for the emotional resolution and the way the community feels they need it, and in doing so expose a lot of people to potentially getting a virus.
And both have happened.
Both have happened.
I
think we've had several different people in our house churches get sick. and all of them recovered well. I don't know whether or not I had the virus because I didn't get tested, but I had for about 2 weeks a pretty high and persistent fever, and a lot of the other symptoms, no respiratory problems. But I'd spoken with a friend of mine who works at a hospital, or was working at a hospital in Harlem, and her recommendation, which I think speaks to your question, she said, as long as your symptoms are treatable, stay home. She's like, because if you come and get tested, there's nothing we can do for you if you're positive. And if you're not positive and you come and get tested, you just sat in a room full of COVID positive patients with a compromised immune system because you know that you're sick. And so, but, talking to her, she said the hospitals there, especially back in March and April, she said, they were so overflowed that the hallways were full of people. They'd run out of beds. They just had people lying on the ground.
Oh, man.
Completely overrun. They had hundreds of healthcare workers come into the city and work basically without, days off for weeks on end. So for our city, for our neighbors, for our churches, it was an exhausting and overwhelming experience that is still not over. We are technically, as of yesterday, I think, entering phase 1 of phasing out of quarantine. But that means, being able to meet in groups of, 5 to 10. All public stuff is still closed. All restaurants are still takeout delivery only. There's, most people are still afraid to ride public transit, but they don't have a choice. So it's dragged on for a long time, and I think it's pretty exhausting. So that's, the positive news is I got a lot of good introvert time.
The one good thing is
I wouldn't want that to overshadow the fact that I have been enormously privileged and blessed in my ability to shelter at home.
Right.
And I think in my emotional makeup, to not find this as burdensome as a lot of people have.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. All right. Yeah. Could you tell me more about your ministry during this? I'm trying to think about. If people aren't gathering, are you doing Zoom stuff? How are you trying to stay connected to your leaders? How are your house churches?
Yes.
Trying to navigate together? Just talk some about that.
So it kind of depends on the church. We've got churches spread out in different boroughs, different ethnic groups, and very different economic classes. And so for several of our churches, the transition to Zoom was really easy. Our church format is very conversational. And so there wasn't really a question of like, well, how do we do this? It's like, it's pretty much the same way as we meet around at a table. It just happens to be a virtual table.
Yep.
And those went well. I think those have been a really, it's been a real benefit and blessing to the people involved in those because it's broken up some of the isolation they have from shelter at home.
Yes.
And actually it's been an opportunity for some people who had kind of drifted away logistically to come back in and participate because they now have almost no competing obligations.
Yeah.
And so in that sense, it's been positive. For other churches, they either disbanded because of this. So our stuff at NYU, for example, all of those students immediately went home.
Okay.
They're not in New York. They're now in different time zones. So I've tried to keep up with the leader of that group and continue to call him. He's in LA. But, as a church, it's sort of ceased to exist for this season.
Okay.
And similarly with other stuff that, there was a mass exodus from New York at the beginning of COVID. Unfortunately, that also is traced to the spread of COVID across the country.
Oh, yeah.
So, say about that. But, some groups met, some groups disbanded, and then others, like our youth churches that are all gang affiliated in the West Bronx, they all live in the same apartment complex. But our staff member who leads those churches was stuck in San Jose. She'd gone there to be with a grandparent who was dying. And so she got stuck at shelter in place in California. and those groups don't have reliable internet access, and so it's been difficult to coordinate. And they live in the same building. You don't really want to pull them together. That's irresponsible. But that's a part of town that economically and logistically they don't have access to the technology to do virtual meetings.
Yep.
So that's been a lot of one-on-one phone calls when possible.
Yes.
And then it's also been difficult because those are all minors, and they have kind of a questionable status with school anyway. So school disbanding and going virtually when they don't have internet access, and they're truant even when it's in session.
Yeah. Sure, got some concerns there.
Absolutely. So I think, so to answer your question, there have been some diverse experiences among our churches about what that's looked like. I think for me personally, a lot of my ministry transitions from sort of the evangelistic relationship when we start a house church to working more directly with house church leaders in more of a spiritual direction role. And in that sense, this has been a good season for that. It has unfortunately isolated a lot of people.
Yes.
Which is a double-edged sword in terms of the negative side of that is that there's nowhere to really escape from the difficult emotional work that needs to be done. The positive side of that is that there's nowhere to really escape from the difficult emotional work that needs to be done. And so my ability to meet one-on-one with people and the role that we had pre-quarantine has been able to flourish in some relationships.
Right.
I think some of the more difficult ones, we've had several kind of relational breakups in the midst of romantic relation breakups in the midst of COVID. That's hard to counsel through virtually.
Yep.
And then anybody that's in our community that's struggled with addiction or substance abuse, as you know, isolation is bad for addiction.
Coping. Yep.
And supporting that at a distance is hard.
Yeah.
And so that's been complicated and a struggle. I think for the most part that's gone well, but it's something that, I remember being on a call with some other ministers and a young preacher on there said, this has been difficult because you can't turn to the guy who's been preaching 25 years and say, well, what did you do when the quarantine happened in your early years of ministry? Everybody's doing this for the first time.
Yes.
And so in that sense, there's not much of a template to learn from. And I don't know what we will acknowledge as our mistakes on the other side of this. But for the most part, I think we've navigated as well as we could. And I think our people are doing well overall.
Okay. We've got about maybe 5 more minutes here, Seth. Let me touch on something you said earlier, and this may lead into my next question. Because one of the things that I think our people might be curious of is how, and I know you're still reflecting, and there's no hindsight yet. We're still in it, but even in some ways that God may have been working and moving. And one of the things that I really appreciate, I hadn't even thought about until you said it, was almost the formation of the leaders of your churches, you always do that, but it sounds like that's been one of the things that you've been able to continue and kind of lean into more, is to see your leaders. I'm curious to hear more, or even expand on that one, but just kind of what God has been up to in this. Have you kind of had some other senses of that maybe?
Yeah, that's certainly one. I would say in addition to that, I think one of the things that I expect to be a positive outcome, I mean, we won't know if it's different post-quarantine until we're post-quarantine. But, one of our principles in ministry is to try to reproduce ourselves as ministers and to try to make ourselves unnecessary in terms of leading and directing churches. We want to reproduce leaders. We want to raise up leaders so that we can continue to start new things. And in that sense, quarantine has been a really good prompting for me to say, it's outside of my capacity to follow up with everybody individually. It's outside of my capacity to try to support everybody individually. So to really ask and expect others to step into that space and be leaders and be disciple makers in their own communities. And so it would be disingenuous to imply that I've done most of the ministry in this season. I've done a lot of the encouraging and support of the people who did most of the ministry in this season.
Wow.
But this has been a good excuse for that, because oftentimes, you know, because I do this full time, because this is my job, quote unquote, I just have the time and capacity for a lot more than our church leaders, because our church leaders are normal everyday people. They work, they have other obligations, you know, and so it's easy for me to step in and say, you know, I've got the bandwidth to do this when you don't. But, you know, when everybody's pretty much out of work or sheltered in place, it becomes not only more available, but probably more important for me to say, you know, how can I support you in leading your church? How can I support you in ministering to these people? Because, you know, it's your church, your plural, you know, so how, and in that sense, I really have seen God working to develop friendships and discipling relationships between people that, you know, it was already there, but it has matured or developed further in ways that I have hope and expectations for post-quarantine.
Yeah. Yeah. Nice to see the leaders leading and the multiplying heart.
Well, even have grown in their confidence and ability to do that.
Yep. Yeah. Definitely a grace there for sure. I can see that. So, we may have about one more minute. Anything else that you think might be good to share with our people before we're done?
Yeah, well, this being at the end, I feel embarrassed as if it's token, but I don't mean it in that way. I felt really grateful and well supported through this, specifically Central. I've had a lot of people check in on me, text me, call me in ways that I'm really grateful for that support. I got what was probably a gratuitous care package in terms of my own health and metabolism. A few weeks ago for my birthday, I got sent 6 jars of salsa from Leal's, and I ate them in 7 days.
Yeah.
So I would just want to say thank you. And I feel very cared for and supported. And a lot of people have not had that through this experience. A lot of people, that's not been their experience of quarantine. And so it would be remiss of me not to acknowledge that it has been mine, and I'm grateful.
That's awesome. Awesome. Well, we love you, brother. And I'm glad you feel that. And you've been a blessing to kind of give us a quick report and from your context there. So we continue to pray for you and the blessings on your ministry. So
Yeah,
thanks for doing this.
Of course.
Okay.
One of the things that we want to do is I want to ask you: is there anything that you heard in that interview with Seth that we could translate into our context here? Because Seth is he's in a different context. He's in it's a different way of doing church. It's a different way of spreading the gospel. It's a different way of living discipleship than what we do here.
Yep.
And I'm curious what we can learn at Central, what we can learn in Amarillo. If you heard anything at all that sparks that kind of thinking, I'd love for you to share that with us tonight in the comments section. And I want to get your take on that too, Adam. But first, after watching that again with Seth, what was there anything that surprises you about what he said, or anything that's just especially compelling?
After I did that interview with him, there were 2 or 3 things that really jumped out to me. Number one, Seth he is so well versed of his context. He knows the demographic, he knows the people, he has studied and contextualized his ministry for the Bronx. And he knows the people, he knows the sensibilities and the culture. He's just a student, not only of the word, but a student of his town. And I just thought, it just jumped out to me that it's kicked in, right? To be able to kick in and know his people in a crisis. This is not the time to study what's going on. He already had that done, and so it kicked in. Number two, his empathy, to be able to talk about the pain and the struggles. I have to go to work. You know, I'm not an essential worker, but I have to take the risk, and he's empathizing with his people. I hope that jumped out. It did to me. Just Seth's being able to empathize and be among his people in the crisis. But then the third thing is the interior work and the availability to God to listen. And maybe there's some inner truth that he's needing to hear, and he's encouraging his leaders to be listening to God. And when you journey inward, it's not easy, but it's good. Right? Yeah. And so all three of those were pretty clear to me in this thing.
Well, and to me, that segues real easy into what can we learn from what Seth is doing in New York City and apply to what Central does in Amarillo, because Seth was not born and raised in New York City.
Right.
He's had to adapt to his culture.
Yes.
And I'm afraid the Texas that I was born and raised in is not the Texas I'm living in right now. Culturally, society, religiously, it's all different. And we've got to adapt. But in order to adapt, we've got to learn, right? We've got to pay attention.
We've got to continually learn, yeah. Those are probably my two takeaways. Were almost saying the same thing again, which is the world is always changing. We need to never stop learning where God has put us and the people that are around us. And Amarillo's demographics continue to change, and we're not frozen in that. We need to continue to learn. And I will close with this. I remember Seth actually on his podcast years ago, he interviewed Randy Harris from ACU, and they were talking about spiritual formation for missionaries. And I remember a quote from Randy saying that spiritual formation prepares you for you know not what. And I thought about this crisis. So to think about that Seth is doing the real inner work of transformation, and he's encouraging that in his leaders. So, I mean, to think about the emotional and spiritual capacity to be empathetic for others, and to equally be available for what stuff God may be needing to tell you. And sometimes it's so hard to hear truth for ourselves that we can't see past, and we can't be in others' lives. So to him to have the spiritual bandwidth that spiritual formation provides to be available for some of the real work that God may need to be showing me, but then to also get beyond me and enter into the space that others are in their pain, that's a lot of bandwidth spiritually. And there's no shortcut for that. You have to be doing the spiritual work that Seth is doing and that we need to be doing in order to be in that crisis and be receiving what God has for us now, but also be able to be empathetic with others. That just really was a striking takeaway for me.
Yeah, amen. And when we go on these short-term mission trips, when we go visit Junior and Patricia, or we go visit Tony in Ukraine, we want to come back and not just check it off the box and say, we did a mission trip. What did we learn, and what can we adapt, or what can we apply as we adapt here to our culture? That is really, that's on my heart tonight. I would love to hear just from our church family, if you heard anything that Seth said, or if you're sensing anything that Seth is doing in New York that we need to pay attention to here at Central as we minister in Amarillo. I would love to hear from you tonight. Adam, I'm grateful for that conversation. Thank you, brother.
Yes, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
All right, we don't have a commercial break. It's just going to be an awkward kind of see you later break, and I want to bring Steve Kearley to the table. Steve is our one of our shepherds here, and he's our chairman of our Foreign Missions Committee. And Steve, last week you had an opportunity to do a Zoom interview with Junior and Patricia Lira, our missionaries in Brasilia, Brazil. And before we show that video, I want to ask you this. We saw with Seth just now how much his connection to Central means to him, and how important that is to him, and how special that is to him to get calls, to get texts, to get emails, to get a care package, knowing that he's part of a family here. And I know Junior and Patricia feel the same way. And I know you do a great job, you and Debbie both, of keeping in touch with our missionaries. Why is that so important, Steve? Why do you think that's so critical for us to maintain these loving connections with these missionaries we support?
Yeah, I know Junior and Patricia are watching, like the stuff we do on Sunday mornings, and so they're very involved with that. It means a lot to them. Actually, last week while I was trying to get this Zoom interview set up with them, I got a report from the Kanaz in Bogota. And we won't do a deal like this with them just because of the language barrier, but they sent a big report about what they're doing during the time of COVID. They had 2 pages of pictures of baptisms, and it was real encouraging to read their report and hear how they've adapted what they're doing, and they're doing some feeding for the community, things like that. So I think the Kanaz, the Liras, I think all these guys that we're connected with are watching what we're doing, and we're watching them through the reports, and so kind of the buzzword is we're all in this together, and I think that's the feeling that it gives them, that we're all in the same boat, we're all with the same challenges, we're watching what each other's doing, and that helps to know the good ways to do things, the mistakes that are being made. So
again, I'm really, it strikes me how we're all having to wear masks, we're all having to, do social distancing, we're all unsure about what next steps to take, we're all worshiping in, online or in different settings in our church buildings or our houses, and we are all in this together. God's global church is going through a thing at the same time.
Yeah,
that's really interesting. Before we watch the Lira's video, Steve, is there anything that we should be looking for? Is there anything that you might tell us to be especially paying attention to?
Well, I think like Missy started out saying on a comment before we even started, it's just so good to see them. Yeah. And so many people here at Central have a connection with them. They have a personal connection with us. So it's really a pleasure for me to just sit down, even though I can't sit down at the table with them. I can sit down and see their faces, and they're just such a sweet couple, such good people. I think just enjoy that interaction with them during this time.
All right. Well, this is Steve Kearley talking with Junior and Patricia Lira in Brasilia, Brazil.
Junior and Patricia, thank you guys so much for taking the time to talk with us a few minutes about the COVID, how COVID is affecting you in Brazil and Brasilia. We really appreciate the time you took, and just being able to hear from you guys and just to see you and be with you for a few minutes. So thanks. I know you guys have told me about worshiping with us on Sunday morning, and what that has meant to you, and I really liked hearing the way you expressed that. So you might tell the congregation at Central about that experience worshiping with us on Sundays via the internet.
Wow, Steve, we miss Central's church so much.
Yes.
And when we go there physically and stay together with the brothers and sisters in Central, we feel like loved and restored to continue the work here in Brasilia. And after this pandemic, we found a way to feeling more close to you, even if online. So now we felt more. How can I say? We felt more restored. Yes, restored, and loved by you. And we feel joy when we are worshiping together. So it was very special worship with you guys online.
Because we feel the same form when I go to visit you personally, and when I watch the watch it in screen and the YouTube, we feel, wow, we would like to be there. Yeah, this is very, very good for us because we feeling restored. We feeling like we are there.
Yes.
And this is very, very good for us. And we stay at home, wow, we can have opportunity to watch it and YouTube and then stay close with our central church. This is very, very important for us.
Yes.
It's restore us because we miss you guys. So and say, oh, wow, this is good because our family stay there so many miles away. Yeah. But wow, it's technology and put it close it.
Yes.
And I know you don't see us, but we see you. This is more like a feel good. We thank you so much for opportunity. I know it's no good moment for us because pandemic, but this is very nice for us.
Yeah, we do feel your presence there, even though we don't see you. Knowing that you're listening, it means a lot to me. I think to a lot of people. Yeah. You know, we've had to make a lot of adjustments at Central because of the COVID virus, and just like the internet services for so many weeks on Sunday mornings. So, what are some of the things? I know you guys aren't meeting at the church, but what are some of the other adjustments that you've had to make in Brasilia?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Juniors.
So have you had to do some other adjusting there? Just tell us about what it looks like there is during the pandemic.
Here in Brasilia, we try. Great question, because in Brasilia we have a big challenge to teach the church now for to do that because the church don't have one experience like this before. And I know in the church here never have opportunity to know or to learning how to do one worship in home and your families. So we decide here to separate in 3 steps. To first of all, we teach the church how you prepare your supper, or you put together your family, because the church here didn't know about that. So we made some videos for teaching. Patricia and Alessandra record like how you made the bread in your home. All right, this is very nice. This video have in YouTube and our page in YouTube in Church of Christ in Brasilia. So this is very, very new for the members. And then we decided in the first step, we choose some families, leadership families, for the teaching the worship. And we recorded online this family, and Sunday, and this family show for others, members of the church, for how to do one worship in your home. The first step for this, and the first 3 weeks. And the second week, we decide, the second step, we decide to make one studio, like a video studio. And we bought the technology, we bought some equipment,
like cameras,
something. We expend some investment, to record the worship and prepare everything. We learned new softwares. This is very hard because we never saw before the softwares. And then, but God bless us, me and Otavio, we work hard to follow the best way. And then we start one worship by online worship. And we bought one chroma key, so behind us.
Green.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we put it there, and and surprise all the church members, and the church members here is, wow, this is very good, because I feeling like I'm staying in a church building. Yes,
Yep.
yes, this is very good, and now
Yeah, good.
yeah.
I think we're hoping that here in Amarillo, we're kind of past the peak of the problem that we're having, but I wanted to ask you guys where you think it's at in Brazil. You know, where are you at in the course of the virus?
Well, Steve, unfortunately, we have not reached the peak of the pandemic yet here in Brazil. So the numbers of people infected with the coronavirus have increased dramatically every day. So today in Brazil, we have more than 700,000 confirmed cases, more than 37,000 deaths, and more than 325,000 people recovered in Brazil. And here in Brasilia, we have about 17,000 confirmed cases, 260 deaths, and approximately about 90,000 people recovered. So I believe that will take a while for us to return to the semi-normal conditions as in Amarillo. So
yeah, I knew that you guys were behind the United States some in Brazil as far as when it started and started severely. So, you know, we will keep praying for our brothers and sisters in Brazil. I know that Patricia had an uncle that passed away from COVID. So has it directly affected the church, or are you guys families? I know your parents are both about my age, and so, or has it affected you? How are you guys as far as your health?
Well, it was very difficult in the beginning because like you said, my aunt lost her husband, and my cousins and my aunt, they are still recovering about that, from their loss, but we are supporting each other. Me, Junior, we are doing well, thank God, and our parents also, they are doing well. And we had two members of the church that had the coronavirus, but they already was in isolation, and now they are recovered. They are okay now. We thank God for that.
In the beginning, when we start the isolation.
Yeah. And we have no news about any other brothers, any other members of relative of any members of the church that have this disease.
Yeah.
So, but we are still aware about what's happened outside there.
Yeah. But we feel one another. I know one another thing too. We have attention. This is about emotionally problems, and because the coronavirus is the beginning, but we have another doenças.
Disease.
I have another disease to take care for our members of the church, and for us, for my family, for everybody. So we maintain like a pastoral contact with the whole church every day, every week. The leadership of the church, we will call for each member of the church and ask, how are you? everything's all right with you, you need some support, and we counseling for the people, and we try to do one thing to help to maintain one emotional health.
Right.
So we try to do that. So this is very positive for us because we have more contact with the members.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
We don't have this before like this. This is very good for us because we're learning to take care for other people.
Oh yeah.
And,
That's amazing. And you're trying to do that every week, you said?
Yeah, every week. Well, every
Wow.
week that all the pastors, me, Otávio, Renato, Álvaro, and Ronaldo. We called the people and said, "How are you?" We sharing the members.
Yes.
Yes.
And we to do one more easy to contact
Yes.
everybody.
So that's amazing. I really commend you guys for doing that. That's what we've tried to do, something like that here,
Mhm.
but a lot of members here.
Yeah.
But it's good that you guys are taking that initiative to try to stay
Yeah.
in touch with people, because that is a big factor, like you say, of the disease is the
Mhm.
emotional part, the separation.
Mhm.
It's so that's a hard thing for us.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Absolutely, yes. We give some examples here. So we have like a 99 small groups here. We do it in conference, like a video conference. So in a small groups, some members of the small groups told us for to feel more their families is more open for the gospel, because feeling more necessity to follow one superior superior.
Something bigger than us, huh? God
Yes.
being a lot bigger than us. Yeah, superior.
Yes, because we don't have power for anything. So we
Yes.
stay home, we feel impotent. So and then the families, the families for the members of the church is open for more to go to small groups.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, because the families, the members of the church invite some members of their families. Their friends came for the small group, but before the pandemic, don't open for that.
Yes.
And so we see this, right?
Yes. The members of the small groups invited their relatives and friends to study the Bible with us.
Mhm.
Yes.
And by video conference, and they are more open to participate by video conference. So they are studying the Bible with us. So some members of the church invited another friends. For example, now Junior are studying with 10 people
Wow.
by video conference. They want to know about Jesus. They want to listen about comfort. They want to listen about what can I do now, and they are
Needed.
they are hunging to listen
Yes.
about God.
Yeah.
So that was the opportunity to preach the gospel for them.
Right.
So now Junior is studying with 10 people now, and some children of some members of the church wants to beginning study about baptism. So Junior now will
five kids.
Wow.
about 12 years old.
Just because the kids for asking for their parents. What is baptism? I like baptize. So this is very, very,
very
different. And another thing, our church they pray more.
Yeah, they are
Yeah.
praying more.
Yeah, we start here one ministry. It's like a 24 hours prayer.
Yeah.
Every hour we have a member of the church to pray for the asks, for the all individuals asks, or all the church asks. Every hour and 24 hours.
24 hours.
So this is very good because we feel we need God. That we see the God, the church looking for more God.
Yeah.
I know you see my face smile, so think I know it's hard, but sometimes I'm happy because we see God provides in the challenges or to do something for.
Yeah, that's a great example of a new opportunity that God provided because of the pandemic.
Yeah.
You guys are such an important part of the Central family here, even though you're so many miles away. And I think there's so many people here that just thank our God whenever we think about you and we think about the church in Brasilia, the capital church there. Like you say, you started out saying that we mean so much to you and it's so good to be here. We feel the same way, so many of us there. You mean so much to us. It's so good when we can sit there in the auditorium at the Capitol Church, that beautiful building, and just be with you there. It's mutual. And I think our partnership in glorifying God through this has just been amazing. I know it's a real blessing for us here at Central.
Okay, and thank you.
Appreciate it. Probably a blessing for you guys there also.
Yeah, we bless us also here. We are so thankful God for that. To God for that. We also
always dreaming.
We always dreamed we would serve God when we have the church like a central. It's complete our dream, and I know we feeling like a family.
Yeah.
You know.
Oh, yes.
When I saw the central, we feel like a family. Mm-hmm. I remember one phrase here, the last mission, when the members from Central Church came here the last time. He said one phrase. This phrase touched my life. He said, "See, some years ago I came here because the project, but now I came here because you are my family."
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I remember this phrase.
It is good.
Wow, this has touched me because most of the time we feeling like a project all the time, and we work for this.
We are part of a project.
We're part of the project, but when somebody said you part of my family, he don't said just for me. He's said for all church.
Yes.
He's we feeling like a Central Church in capital Brasilia. This is a part of the same church.
Yes, same family.
Yes,
same families. Wow, this is wonderful.
Yeah.
It's because this I worship God. Because this I'm decided to glorify God's name. Because God put us together.
Yes.
Because this would thank so much.
Yeah.
We agree with that, and I echo all those thoughts that you had there. We feel the same way here.
I could go another hour listening to Junior and Patricia and watching them. Steve, it looks like the Texas Longhorns paraphernalia in the back was a staged setup. How long did it take you to set that room up, brother?
No, actually, that's all over my house.
You didn't have to set it up.
Any room you film would have that in the background.
I know that so many in our church family, well, really anybody who's met Junior and Patricia, just fall in love with them and with their genuine, just sweet spirit of those two. Steve, I know you talk to them a lot, and I know you and Debbie Zoom with them a lot. But in that particular interview, what stuck out to you as something really compelling or important?
Well, I was impressed by the several things he talked about in the thoughtful way that they're being proactive in taking care of the church there and in serving God, you know, in different ways, the things they've had to change. And one of the things that didn't make it in there, I asked them about if they had plans to open up, and they said actually the government had told them they could open the churches there, but they don't want to do that until they're sure that it's going to be safe. Because he said their saying is the priority is for the people. And so they are wanting to have like we did here. Yep. They want to err on the side of caution and make sure they're not putting anybody in harm's way by doing it. So they are working on plans, and they've set July 12th as a day to try to do that, just depending on how the disease progresses there in Brasilia. So I did tell them we would be praying about that July 12th date, and that God would speak into their plans as they try to do that, set that date and work for that. I think, you know, I couldn't believe they call every member weekly. I mean, that was a really impressive thing to me for them to be able to do. And
well, they're averaging now 200 plus.
Yeah,
is that right, on Sunday mornings?
I'm sure they're pushing 200. Yeah.
It's a lot of people to call.
Yeah. And they also talked about they've got a food drive-through distribution set up at the church there now that they hadn't done in the past. But they're serving a poor community close to the church there by people being able to drive into the parking lot and just put food into their trunk. And I was like, that's what we do here. I mean, that's what, you know, the canals are doing in Bogota. So what an opportunity for the church to stand out in the community as a place that's taking care of people.
You know, both the Liras and Seth talked about opportunities. We're in the midst of uncertainty. We're in the midst of pain and trial and separation and change, but there's opportunity for the gospel. There's opportunities for us to do new things, and people's hearts seem to be more receptive to the gospel. I love the way Junior and Patricia have really honed in on that, how the people that they're with, they're praying more, they're open more to the gospel. People are actually being drawn more to the comfort, I think Junior said, of Jesus Christ. And I wonder what kind of opportunities, you know, are we maybe missing here? Because God's at work during these times of pain and these times of uncertainty. I wonder what this focus on opportunities, what that would mean for us if we would take a similar view.
Yeah, and I don't know specifics to answer that question, but that struck me too. That I think that we can miss that if we're not intentional, in that there are more people that are looking for answers, that are wondering what's going on, and we have the answers. You know, we have the comfort, we have the place for refuge, we have the higher calling, the higher place to be, and if we don't look for people and look for opportunities to share that and show it. And I think a lot of the ways that we do that is by being people that are confident in what we have. And you know, we're not running scared and shooting from the hip. We're methodical, and we know that there's something better than this, and that's what we're part of.
That's right. And people are looking for the Lord. They may not know that, but they are. They're looking for that answer. They're looking for that assurance and that clarity. They're looking for Jesus in Brasilia. They're looking for Jesus in New York City. People are looking for Jesus in Amarillo, Texas. And we have a long way to go and a lot to learn from our brothers and sisters all around the world.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Steve, and thanks to Adam for putting those videos together. Thank you to Josh Jones, who's behind the camera tonight and running our live stream. Next Wednesday night at 7 o'clock, we're going to do a similar thing with Tony Morrow, who runs Our House in Ukraine, and we're also going to be visiting with Jared Odiombo from the Alara and Ring Road Ministries in Kenya. So be looking forward to that next Wednesday night at 7 o'clock. Thank you for your comments. Thank you for posting tonight and joining us. And I'll close by with this blessing. May the peace and the power and the presence of our Lord Jesus guide you and sustain you and keep you always.